You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. I want you to really sit with that. Let it settle. Because for far too long, you've been conditioned to think that every decision you make, especially the ones that prioritize your peace, must come with a justification. That if you say no, if you step back, if you change your mind, you owe everyone around you a reason they can digest, accept, or approve of. But the truth is, growth doesn't require permission slips. Healing doesn't need an audience. And peace doesn't beg to be understood. It's uncomfortable at first, isn't it? Saying, this no longer works for me, and not following it up with a paragraph explaining why. Walking away from relationships that drain you and not leaving breadcrumbs for closure. Creating space for your own well-being. And not feeling guilty for not making yourself smaller to comfort someone else's expectations. That discomfort, that tension in your chest is the sound of old habits breaking. It's the sound of you choosing yourself, maybe for the first time, without needing to shrink for the sake of others. See, the moment you begin to heal, you'll notice something strange. People will start asking, what's wrong with you? You'll stop overextending yourself. You'll stop participating in conversations that lead nowhere. You'll say, I'm not available for that without flinching. And that scares people who only knew how to relate to the version of you who constantly explained, defended, and over-delivered. Some of them will call you cold. Some of them will say you've changed. Some will try to guilt trip you into staying in a space you've outgrown. But what they're really feeling isn't your attitude. It's the absence of their control. It's the silence you've created by no longer justifying your boundaries. That silence, that's growth. That's power. You don't owe your family an explanation for breaking a generational cycle. You don't owe your friends an explanation for choosing peace over performance. You don't owe your partner an explanation for finally honoring your truth. Because here's what happens when you constantly explain yourself. You start diluting your power. You begin reshaping your truth into something palatable for others. You start editing your growth to make sure it fits neatly into their comfort zone. And eventually you lose sight of the very reason you started evolving in the first place. When you explain too much, you open the door for negotiation where there should be none. You invite people to critique, challenge, or invalidate your decisions as if your healing needs their stamp of approval. But the moment you realize that your peace is reason enough, you begin to move differently. You start walking into rooms with your head held high, not because everyone agrees with you, but because you've made peace with not needing them to. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. And it doesn't make you mean or distant or arrogant. It makes you aware. Aware of your limits, aware of your needs, aware of how much of your life you've spent trying to be understood by people who never cared to listen in the first place. And once you become aware, you can't go back. You can't unknow what it feels like to have your boundaries respected, even if it means you had to enforce them in silence. Let me be clear. Your healing is not a group project. You don't need a committee of voices weighing in on whether your transformation is acceptable. You are allowed to outgrow people without warning. You are allowed to protect your energy without explanation. You are allowed to keep some things sacred and private while you evolve. Not everyone deserves access to your process. Not everyone is qualified to understand your journey. And that's not your problem to solve. There is a quiet, powerful kind of confidence that comes with no longer explaining yourself. At first, it may feel like isolation, but eventually it becomes freedom. Because when you stop trying to convince people to understand you, you finally have space to understand yourself. And what you find there, what you uncover in that silence, is a deeper clarity, a stronger sense of self, and a peace that no amount of explaining could ever bring. You'll learn that the people who truly see you won't need an explanation. They'll respect your distance. They'll support your boundaries. They'll recognize your silence as strength, not attitude. And those who don't, let them think whatever they need to. That's not your business, and that's not your battle. You don't need to be understood to be at peace. You don't need to be validated to be powerful. And you don't need to keep explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Just grow. quietly, boldly, unapologetically, and let your peace speak for itself. Growth isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with applause or a round of validation. Real growth is subtle. It shows up in the choices you make when no one's watching. It lives in the pauses you take before reacting. It's in the boundaries you enforce without needing to shout. The most powerful version of you won't need to convince anyone of your worth. It will be felt in your presence, in the way you move, and in the way you no longer need to explain what you're doing or why you're doing it. Because when you're truly growing, your life starts to speak for itself. There's a phase in healing where you're tempted to defend every decision, where you feel like you have to narrate your journey so that people don't misjudge your silence, your distance, or your detachment. But you eventually realize that those who are meant to be in your life don't need a play-by-play. They'll see it in how you carry yourself. They'll sense it in the peace you radiate. And the ones who don't, they were never listening to understand in the first place. They were listening to stay in control. Think about it. You used to explain yourself to avoid being misunderstood, to keep the peace, to be liked. You wanted people to know that you weren't being rude, you were just exhausted, that you weren't pulling away out of spite, but out of necessity, that you weren't changing because of pride, but because you finally found clarity. But with time, you learn that anyone who's truly for you doesn't require constant clarification. They can see the growth without the explanation. Your elevation doesn't need defense. It needs discipline. And discipline often looks like silence. It's waking up early to take care of your body, even when no one notices. It's choosing not to argue with people who twist your words, because your peace is louder than their noise. It's outgrowing conversations that don't feed your future, and it's letting go of the version of you that always needed to prove something. You no longer have to. Your life will show it. The changes you make, the energy you no longer entertain, the standards you refuse to lower, those will speak volumes. You don't have to go around telling people how much you've healed. Let them see it in the way you no longer flinch at old triggers. Let them see it in your calmness, in your patience, in your refusal to engage in chaos. Let them witness your transformation in your presence, not in your explanations. There's power in stillness, in not needing to defend your every move, in no longer responding to every criticism with a justification. Silence isn't weakness, it's restraint, it's maturity, it's understanding that your energy is too valuable to waste on trying to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. Some people won't recognize the new you because they're too attached to who you used to be, the version that tolerated too much, stayed too long, kept explaining. But your growth isn't their comfort zone, and that's okay. You don't have to shrink back into the familiar just to make others feel secure. You're not responsible for their inability to adjust to your evolution. Growth becomes undeniable when your actions shift consistently, when you stop reacting and start responding, when you stop chasing and start attracting, when you stop explaining and start embodying. People will notice that they can no longer pull the same emotional strings they used to. They'll see that their tactics don't work anymore. And they'll either evolve with you or remove themselves. Both are blessings. There's something sacred about knowing you're leveling up and not needing to say a word about it. You begin to understand that your journey isn't a performance. It's not for likes, applause, or approval. It's for you, for your peace, for your purpose. And if that makes you seem distant, quiet, or different, so be it. You'll get to a place where someone asks, "What happened to you?" And all you'll do is smile, because trying to explain your growth to someone who only sees you through the lens of your past is like trying to describe the ocean to someone who's only ever seen a puddle. They won't get it, and they're not supposed to, because your growth was never meant for their validation. It was meant for your liberation. You won't need to post about every win. You won't need to clap back at every critic. You won't need to convince anyone of how far you've come. You'll just live it, and the results, your peace, your alignment, your freedom, will say everything that words never could. Let your life be the evidence. Let your calm be the message. Let your consistency be the loudest thing in the room. And let the ones who doubted you watch in silence, because your growth already answered every question they had. There comes a point in your life where you finally realize not everyone is meant to understand your path, and not everyone deserves access to your process. And that's not arrogance, that's protection. Because when you constantly explain yourself, when you try to bring everyone into the room with you, you end up carrying weight that was never yours to hold. You start adjusting your pace, your vision, and your energy just to keep people comfortable with your journey. But your growth isn't a group project, it's personal, it's sacred. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop offering explanations to people who only listen to find fault. You've probably done it before. Told someone about a new boundary you set, hoping they'd understand, only to be met with resistance or judgment. You tried to explain why you stopped calling, why you left the relationship, why you didn't show up like you used to, and still it felt like they weren't really hearing you. Because some people don't want an explanation. They want the old version of you that was easier to manipulate. They want the access they used to have, not the version of you that is self-aware, disciplined, and healing. That's why explaining yourself can sometimes feel like talking to a wall. It's not that you're saying the wrong things, it's that they never wanted to understand you in the first place. And this is where the shift happens. You stop explaining, not out of bitterness, not because you don't care, but because you finally realize that your energy is precious. You stop oversharing with people who are only curious, not supportive. You stop justifying your distance to those who never reciprocated closeness. You stop defending your peace to people who thrive off your chaos. You learn to move in silence, not because you're hiding, but because you've learned the value of privacy in a world that's quick to misunderstand growth. Growth requires silence sometimes. It requires space, and most importantly, it requires a boundary between you and the noise. Because not everyone deserves to be in the room where your transformation is taking place. You can love people from a distance. You can wish them well without inviting them back into your process. You can outgrow the need to be understood and instead grow into the kind of peace that no longer depends on external validation. There's a kind of strength that shows up when you stop giving people the keys to your emotional house. You stop unlocking the door every time someone knocks with questions. Why did you change? Why don't you call like you used to? Why are you being so cold? The truth is, you're not being cold. You're being clear. And clarity is uncomfortable for people who benefited from your confusion. When you finally see things for what they are, you don't need to explain it. You just act on it. You shift, you protect yourself, you prioritize your growth, and you let people feel whatever they need to feel about that without trying to fix it for them. You begin to understand that some people are more invested in the version of you that stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed available on demand. They liked the version of you that bent over backwards for everyone but yourself, the version that didn't have boundaries, the version that explained and apologized and overcompensated. But now that version is gone. And that loss will be uncomfortable for them, but it will be freeing for you. Let them adjust, let them question, let them talk. That's not your concern anymore. Your only job is to keep growing, to keep healing, to keep walking forward, even if it means walking alone for a while. Because real transformation is quiet, but it is undeniable. And when your life starts reflecting the changes you've made, people will either get curious or get distant. Let both happen. You're not here to drag anyone into your next chapter. You're here to write it with clarity, intention, and peace. You don't need to prove you've changed. You just need to live it. The way you speak, the way you protect your energy, the way you say no without guilt. That's the proof. And the people who are meant for you will see it, respect it, and support it. No explanations needed, just presence, just consistency, just truth. Your life doesn't need to be understood by everyone. It just needs to feel right to you. And when you let go of the pressure to be understood, you create room for something deeper, authentic peace. The kind of peace that doesn't beg to be seen or validated. It just is. It just exists. And it shows up in how you carry yourself, in how you no longer chase closure, in how you no longer waste words on people who aren't listening, how you no longer waste words on people who aren't listening. So let them wonder, let them assume, let them misunderstand. You're not here to make them comfortable. You're here to become everything they thought you couldn't be. And that doesn't need to be explained. It just needs to be lived. When you choose to stop explaining yourself, you also choose to stop being controlled by the expectations and judgments of others. And this is where true freedom lies. Freedom to be yourself. Free from the constant need to justify your actions, your decisions, or your boundaries. There's immense power in being able to move forward in life without needing approval, without needing validation from those who may never understand or accept your journey. It's the difference between living for others and living for yourself. And the truth is, when you choose to live for yourself, you create a life that is more aligned with who you truly are, not who others want you to be. Think about all the times you've tried to explain your decisions to people who didn't understand. Maybe it was leaving a toxic relationship, taking a break from a friendship, or choosing a new path that seemed unconventional. At some point, you likely found yourself over-explaining, almost pleading with people to see things from your perspective. And the more you explain, the more exhausted you became, because it's draining to justify your choices to others, especially when they're not willing or able to see things your way. What happens in these moments is that you're giving away your power, your energy, your time, your peace, all in an effort to make someone else feel comfortable with your decisions. But what if, instead of explaining yourself, you simply let your actions speak for themselves? Imagine what it would be like to not need to convince anyone that you made the right choice, to stop worrying about whether they understood why you chose to walk away or why you chose a different route. What if the only thing that mattered was that you knew deep down that you were doing what was best for you, that you were making choices based on your own values, desires, and well-being, not based on what would make others feel comfortable or accepted? Here's the thing. When you stop explaining yourself, you also stop second-guessing your decisions. You no longer need to look for external validation to reassure you that you made the right move. You stop questioning yourself and your choices because you trust your intuition and your ability to make decisions that align with your higher purpose. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you start standing firmly in your own truth. You realize that your decisions don't need to be validated by anyone other than yourself. Your journey, your growth, your evolution, none of it requires an explanation to anyone but you. The more you stand in your truth, the more you begin to attract people who resonate with that energy. And here's the secret: the right people will never require an explanation. They will respect your choices even if they don't fully understand them. They will trust that you're doing what's best for yourself because they understand that we all have our own paths to walk. They won't question you, they won't judge you, and they won't try to change you. They'll simply support you because they recognize your strength, your clarity, and your ability to make decisions that honor your growth. On the other hand, when you keep explaining yourself to people who don't value your boundaries, don't respect your decisions, or don't understand your growth, all you're doing is inviting unnecessary conflict into your life. You're engaging with people who have not earned the right to question you, to challenge you, or to make you feel like you owe them an explanation. The truth is, some people won't understand your growth because they are still stuck in their own limit. They might be afraid of change, of stepping out of their comfort zone, and your evolution may challenge their perception of the world, and that's okay. It's not your responsibility to help them see it. It's your responsibility to continue growing, to continue evolving, and to continue stepping into the best version of yourself. When you stop explaining yourself, you create space for personal power. You reclaim your energy, your time, and your inner peace. You stop wasting your resources trying to convince others to accept or approve of your journey, and you start channeling that energy into what truly matters: your growth, your dreams, and your well-being. You realize that the people who are meant to be in your life will understand your choices without needing you to explain them. They will see your actions, your commitment, and your progress, and they will respect it. They won't need to know every detail of your journey because they trust that you're on the right path for you. In this space, you also become less afraid of rejection or judgment. You understand that not everyone will get it, and that's perfectly fine. You're not here to please everyone. You're here to live authentically, to pursue what makes you feel fulfilled, and to honor your own growth. And when you stop explaining yourself, you stop being afraid of being misunderstood. You stop fearing that people won't accept the version of you that's evolving. Instead, you embrace the fact that your growth might not make sense to everyone, and that's a sign that you're stepping into something greater. So here's the power of it. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving away your power. You stop putting your peace and your growth in the hands of others. You start trusting your own process, your own decisions, and your own worth. And as you move forward in your life, you do so with clarity, confidence, and the knowledge that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your journey speaks for itself. Your actions speak for themselves. And in the end, that's all that truly matters.